Welcome to the Texas A&M University College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences Peer Programs STEM Education Series. Today, histology professor Dr. Larry Johnson will present Science and You. What is a scientist? What kinds of jobs can a scientist do? And what are the skills they need to be successful in their careers? Dr. Johnson will answer all of these questions and more in today's presentation. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, and we want to welcome you to our first series of webcasts to be able to tell you about various aspects of science. And today we're going to talk about science in you. So we will do that, and here we can see some different aspects of science. And so the objective is to define the word science, how it's used, its methods, and what are some of the fields in science, and also talk about some careers. Maybe you'd like to be a scientist too. And then a little bit about travels of scientists, different places I've traveled in the world that maybe you would like to travel to too. So what is science? Science is from the Latin word scientia, that means knowledge or to know. It's the effect of discovery, so you discover things, to increase the human understanding of how things work. So it's a human thing. Monkeys don't care about science. Humans do. And so for human understanding of how things work. And you do that, scientia, the Latin word, knowledge, and you discover things. That's what science is all about. So through control methods, scientists use control methods to study how the physical world works, is what they try to do. Try to gather information and figure out how things work. So they use control methods to observable evidence. So they got to observe something and be able to show other folks that that is true. And then they just try to figure out how things work. So they got a big puzzle of life to figure out how things work. Now, what are some of the methods of science? Some of the methods of science include experimentation, and we're going to do an experiment today. Well, you and I will do. So you stimulate, you want to simulate whatever is in nature. And so you have a little experiment to try to conduct that. So you try to gain knowledge through research. And so experimentation is research where you're trying to understand how things work by using control methods, by using observable evidence to be able to do that. Now, how has the word science been used in the past? How has it been? I mentioned scientia. It means knowledge is one way. But here are other words. These are synonyms. In other words, they mean the same thing as science. Cut, separate, discern, he cuts off, I split. These are action words that scientists do. And here we can see a dog that was cut here, so we can see this is a dog, we call him Slice. And so this dog, we can see the different structures that are inside the dog. You can see his brain, see his tongue, see his eyeball, and see the different components of this. And so we can use this dog to show the veterinary students what's inside the dog so that they won't have to cut your dog in half whenever you take your dog to the veterinarian. And also we can reuse this dog over and over again to teach a lot of veterinary students. So that's some of the action words the scientists do. Another one that they do is cut the dog the other way to find out what's inside. And here we can see the dog's heart. We can see the lung. There's the esophagus that's going through there. And this is my favorite part of the dog because here is a trachea going through. But when you look on the other side, you see the bronchi where it has branched into the two different lungs. So this is lung, heart that we see through there. So as I mentioned, those action words, and whoa, someone has cut open a human head. Of course, this was a deceased individual. Now, is that one person or two? Well, it's two people, and see, we can see in there that both of these individuals have a brain in their head. And so what scientists do, they make observations of a few. So we have two individuals here that we're looking at, and we see that both of them have a brain in their head, and then they make deductions about the whole general population. So I say, you have a brain in your head because I see that both of these individuals have a brain in their head. And that's what scientists do. They make observations of a few things, and then they make inferences of many. They imply about you, even though they did not cut your head open that we see. And so those are action words: cut, separate, discern. Those are action things that scientists do to be able to explore what's inside the body. Now science also has to be related to the word philosophy, which is the love of knowledge, is what it is. So science is equal to philosophy in other languages. It's a synonym in some languages. So maybe you've seen behind a scientist's name, PhD. What does that mean? It means a doctor of philosophy. Philosophy, and the philosophy is the love of science. In other words, it's the doctor of love of knowledge. They want to know how the world works, and they come up with experiments. And that's part of the creative part, to come up with experiments to be able to set up the experiment, to be able to test things of how the world works. And so here we can see that scientists may be attached to their benches. I mean, who besides a scientist would love a bunch of test tubes? Look, they keep, discovery keeps scientists attached to their benches to be able to see what's going on. Or maybe they'll be out in the jungles. You think there's mosquitoes out there, snakes out there, spiders out there? The scientists may be looking for the most poisonous snake out there. So this is another thing that they do. Part of the methods that they do is to go out where life is to be able to study it. And also they like to follow threads of difficult theories. E equal mc squared. You probably know that theory that we see. And so science allows you to ask fundamental questions about life. That it does. Things that impact people all over the world is what we want to do, and I'll have an example of that here later on. Also, it represents numbers of people who are curious, they're cooperative, they have intellectual rigor. These are the type of people that you want to be involved with and maybe be one yourself. These are characteristics of scientists. And so scientists, the methods that we use, they seek to understand things in a reproducible way. If you can't reproduce it, no one would believe it. If you discovered how to solve cancer right now, no one would believe it until they could test it out and be able to reproduce these observations. So you have to make reproductions of your observations before anybody could believe your predictions to occur. So words used by scientists include model, and so they can't observe all observations in the world, so they have a model. And maybe that's a computer model, or maybe that's a model with animals or animal parts that we use, maybe with cell culture that they would do. And there's also a hypothesis. Now, you've studied hypothesis in school, and hypothesis, you might say, is an educated guess. And I want to emphasize the word educated of that guess, because a hypothesis is not an unlikely thing. A hypothesis is a likely thing. So if your car doesn't start in the morning, there's three things. It could be no electricity, no spark. It could be no gas, or it could be no air. So those three things is what can be wrong. So if you say, my car wouldn't start because the window wouldn't roll up, then that is not a hypothesis, because it's not likely that rolling up the window has anything to do with starting the engine unless it's an electric one, which means that you have no electricity. So scientists come up with experimental design, and this is the creative part. You have to come up with the design of the experiment. That's what I like about science. And then a peer review, you have to convince your peers, the people that know about science. And then there's scientific theory, scientific ethics. So you have to keep things above board. You have to be able to use proper procedures to do things and be ethical about it. Tell the truth. Do things that illustrate that. And physical law and laws of nature. And so I mentioned to you the methods, a reproducible way to make predictions about the world. Like I predicted that you had a brain in your head from the 2 observations I did, and that's what scientists do. And hypothesis. There are also physical law. There's certain laws that go on, like gravity that we have. And here we see a bell jar. This bell jar is like my rib cage that we have right here. And here's a diaphragm that's down below there. If I pull that, it will expand the glove. If you can see the glove expanding in through there, you can see that. That's Boyle's law. Has to do with volume and pressure. So when I pull down on this, I increase the volume inside there, and that reduces the pressure and causes air to come into to expand the balloon. This is how you breathe with your diaphragm that we can see. And so basically Boyle's law has to do with pressure and volume, and they're inversely related. So basically when you pull down on the diaphragm, you increase the volume and you reduce the pressure, causing a vacuum. And that's how air comes into your body. And as I mentioned to you, we have that, that's a diaphragm that we have, and we see one right here. I don't know, who likes barbecued ribs in here? I like barbecued ribs. These are ribs here of a dog. I don't eat barbecued ribs of a dog, of course, but these are the muscles, the same muscles you eat when you eat barbecued ribs from a cow or a pig. But in here we can see the diaphragm. The diaphragm's right there. There's the heart. The lungs would be in this space, and here we can see the back of the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is a thin membrane, and you can see it's pretty thin. You can see right here how thin it is. Thin membrane around an opening is what a diaphragm is. In this case, it's muscle and connective tissue, and so whenever that diaphragm contracts, that causes a vacuum. Boyle's law is involved and causes air to be intake into the body. Have you ever hiccuped before? When you hiccup, do you suck in or blow out? Well, hiccup is a diaphragm uncontrolled contractions of the diaphragm, and when you hiccup, you suck in because the diaphragm only brings air in, it doesn't blow it out. And so we can see this is a dog. We call him Shorty, a dog that we have, that we see a hound dog. And if we look inside the hound dog, we can see the diaphragm. So the diaphragm's right there, as you can see. I don't know if you've ever seen a little baby sleeping in a crib and wonder if that baby's still alive. I bet somebody did that to you. But if you ever did, you're probably looking at the little baby's belly going in and out because the baby is sleeping, breathing with this diaphragm. So there's a diaphragm, the same as what we saw before, diaphragm between the liver and the lung. This is part of the lungs that we see right there. And so also we have a nasal cavity, and we have that right here. There's a pig's nose that we can see. If you look inside there, of course you can see his whiskers, see his 2 nostrils. But what I want you to see inside there is the butterfly-shaped structure. The butterfly-shaped structure is turbinates. Turbine, something spins. As the air goes around the butterfly, it spins. And in doing so, the centrifugal force, or the force that sends things to the outside, it makes the dust particles, which is heavier, gets thrown against the side, and it gets caught in the mucus. That's how you clean the mucus, clean the air by getting dust trapped in the mucus as you take air in. And so we can see in this specimen here, we can see the turbinates that are there. So if we could go back to the specimens. Here we go. And we can see those. So you see there's 2 nostrils that we have on the pig, and then you see the turbinates. And we have those turbinates there, and the air's going to spin around in the space that you see. And here we can see, whoa, I don't know if you've seen body whorls before, But if you would cut off your nose, you would see that you have turbinates too. And so on the right side, we see a histologic view. And of course, I love histology. And so where the light spot is where the air goes, and it spins as the air goes around. And you can see it right between the eyes down below. The eyes there, you can see the turbinates in the individual there. Again, so we are like the pig in that sense, in that we have kind of like a butterfly-shaped structure in there. So the air kind of goes through kind of like a maze that it goes through to be able to get through the lungs. And in doing so, it spins and the dust particles get trapped against the side. And so we can see those. In addition to that, on those turbinates that we see there on the right, and there's blood vessels in there. See the lighter spaces inside the pink? And those are swell bodies. They are blood vessels that fill up with blood. And when they fill up with blood, they close the airflow. So they close the opening in there so air doesn't go through there. Now, maybe you've seen things the football players have across their nose called breathe right. I call it breathe wrong, because you're not supposed to breathe with your both nostrils all the time. And the breathe right holds your nose up so you're breathing through both nostrils, but you're not supposed to. What happens is your nose gets dry, and the mucus inside there dries out. So you need to rehumidify it every 30 minutes. So we're going to do a little experiment to test that theory.
Dr. Johnson, before we do that experiment, we've got lots of questions here from the kiddos about the specimens you're using today. So could you tell us a little bit about Shorty there, or the other specimens that you're showing them?
Yes, absolutely. These dogs are normal dogs. They were put down humanely, and they were extra dogs that were there, so we got those. And these are plastinated. That is, you take the water and the tissue out of the water and fat out of the dog with chemicals, and you replace it with a liquid plastic. So these are plastinated that you can see. You can see he was cut down the center with a saw once it was frozen, and then he was processed that way. So these are dogs that we use over and over again with our vet students, so we don't have to terminate too many dogs, but there's really too many dogs in the world. And so we just got some of them that we could cut and be able to teach many, many vet students what's inside the dog, so they won't have to do that to your dog. Again, this is a plastinated specimen, so it doesn't smell or anything. It's like plastic, even though it is the real specimen that we have.
And then they want to know two things. One, what are the downsides of using deceased animals like this? And then what are the upsides, or your thoughts and opinions on using live animals in research and study?
Okay. In terms of some experiments you can do, like histology, all the specimens are dead, or at least you take a biopsy from a live animal and then examine that. So it all depends upon what the experiments you're going to do. If you're going to do an experiment that we're going to do today, you need to have a live person because you can't do that with this dead dog. And so it all depends upon what experiment you're doing. If you're studying physiology, that's how things function, then you have to have a functional specimen to be able to do that, is what you have to have. However, if you're doing anatomy, you can have a dead individual and you slice it open so you'll be able to see what is inside the individual. So it depends upon what the experiment calls for. And if we could set up the experiment that we have that we were going to do today, I was mentioning to you that we have these swell bodies inside our nasal cavity, and those swell bodies are associated with closing the blood flow down to one side or the other side. And so if you ever had a cold before and cutting couldn't breathe through your nose, you had to breathe through your mouth. You know how dry your mouth gets. Well, the same thing happens to your nose. So your nose gets dry whenever the air is coming in and out. So every 30 minutes, you breathe out of one side of your nose, and then you breathe out the other side. Maybe if you switch to me, you'll be able to see the little experiment that was set up. So what I want you to do, let's do an experiment, and I'll put up a hypothesis. I hypothesize that you're breathing out of one side of your nose more than the other, because I know that every 30 minutes you breathe out of one side and then you breathe out of the other side. So let's just do an experiment right now. Close one nostril and suck in. Close the other nostril and suck in, and you'll discover you're breathing out of one side more than the other. I can tell that I was breathing out of one side more than the other. There's so many rights and there's so many lefts that will be, that you can see. Check it out in 30 minutes, it'll be switched. And so the hypothesis was that you breathe out of one side more than the other. And if you had that breathe right thing across their nose, what you do is you'll be able to breathe out of both nostrils. Okay for a football game, but it's not okay for all the time, because you shouldn't be breathing out of both nostrils, because you need to close down the nostril every 30 minutes so it can rehumidify. So the mucus and all can gain that moisture again that was dried out as the air was going through there. Okay, so that's the swell bodies that we were talking about, and the breathe right, I call it breathe wrong, as you know. But that was a hypothesis that I had, was that you're breathing out of one side more than the other, and I assume that you discovered that. Check it out in 30 minutes and see if you're switched to the other side. Now, there are different fields in science, aren't there? There's a lot of them, and there's two major fields. One we call, there's natural science, which studies phenomenon including biological life, and then there's social studies that are like behavior studies of humans and societies and things. So there's natural science and there's social science, and we call these empirical sciences because you can test things. You can test things to find out and do experiments associated with them. And so natural and social sciences include engineering. So engineering is science and health science. So veterinary medicine is science, medicine is science. So all that components is science. Engineering and medicine are science too, and they fall in usually in the natural science field. Now there is another thing. Mathematics is considered a formal science, and that is that you can do things without testing things, or you can do testing things too with mathematics, but you don't have to do the experiments necessarily for the math. So that's formal science as opposed to empirical science, where you can test experiments to verify your observations that will occur. So today we're talking about natural science and social science, and here we see dolphins. Maybe you want to be a scientist, maybe you want to be a social scientist, okay, or maybe you want to be a biological scientist, and maybe you thought about different careers. So which field of science, empirical, natural or social, or formal science would study dolphins? Which one would study dolphins? Well, the natural science would study dolphins and their behavior and all. Remember, the social science is human behavior, so this would be animal behavior. How many careers in science do you know? How many can you name? Well, there's a bunch of them. And here we see many, and this is just the first part of the alphabet. Look at the biology, all the ones in chemistry and physics and earth science. Many, many options that you could have. Whoa.
Dr. Johnson, we have another question. As you're getting into talking about the fields of science, the types of science, we have a student who would like to know, what is biometric science? Biometric science.
Okay, biometric science. I don't know exactly what biometric science is. I assume that it has to do with mathematical modeling of things, but I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe you can look it up as we go, and we'll be able to answer that question. It's certainly related to life forms, but I'm not sure, maybe measures of things, how things compare in size-wise, or maybe mathematical modeling of science and things. I was thinking the latter. Okay, so if we look at the astronomy, that is a type of science, right? Astronomy, this is kind of out of this world, so to speak. It's a study of celestial bodies that we see, and one of those is Earth. Which one is Earth? That's up there. Is it the blue one at the bottom? No, Earth's up there, isn't it? It is blue, but it's up there. And so we use telescopes to look at that, not the Earth, but other celestial bodies that are located out throughout our universe. And so there's also geology and volcanology. A lot of people love volcanoes, and there's a lot of volcano action in Hawaii now, aren't there? There is. So it's a study of magma and lava and how it runs. What is the relationship between geology and astronomy? How are they related? Where did our rocks come from? Whoa, you ever heard of a meteorite landing from outer space? Where did our water come from? So, of course, geology is local science, local activity, but the science from we're part of our universe, and things from the universe impact the world. And so here we can see some different things. We got some specimens here. This is a rock, a red rock. What makes a rock red? What makes your blood red? Iron. Iron. So there's iron in this rock. So there's iron in this rock. Who knows what is the state rock of Texas? You know, Texas have a state bird, the mockingbirds. It's got a state flower, the bluebonnets. It's also got a state rock. Who knows a state rock? A state rock is petrified palm tree, petrified wood. So this is petrified wood, about 50 million years old. Of course, scientists were not back here 50 million years ago. They were not here at that time. So this was a piece of wood that all the minerals were replaced during the 50 million years, and so it's now rock wood, petrified wood, and it's a state rock of Texas. There's a lot of rocks here in College Station, Texas. There's more rocks here than there are, more petrified wood than there would be in the petrified forest in Arizona, except that the petrified forest, the dirt has been washed away and we can see it. Anytime they dig around in College Station, they come up with petrified wood. And it's hard to go and get little rocks that doesn't have petrified wood on it. Even across campus at Texas A&M, they have these dressed rocks on the sidewalk, and there's little pieces of petrified wood in those rocks. So that's a whole nother career that a person could look at it. If you look at the one on the upper left-hand side, you can see this one. You can see this piece of petrified wood has a knot in it, and you can see it up on the top there, where you can see the grains of wood in through this and this piece of petrified wood. But scientists would love to study about that, and they get these specimens and they get the fossils to be able to study things back in time, is what they do. Engineering is another thing. I said that was part of science. How many engineer areas do you know? Mechanical, maybe aircraft, maybe things like this. Electrical, power sources, electronics. Civil engineer, they build things, build bridges and build things. And then I got an environmental engineer, worried about pollution of the world. And then also we have industrial engineer, making things. Even the Coke can that you have was put together by an industrial engineer, and you might note that it has the metal is bent in so that it can swell and not explode and not pop. If it's in your car full hot, it would just expand a little bit and not pop. So these are things that industrial engineers are thinking about, and then the chemical engineers, they like to work with raw things to make new things, make plastics, make different things. Is what they do. So here's your test. Which type of engineering made this? Which one? Who makes things? Civil engineers made that, even though they didn't call them engineers in those days. Who made this? Of course, there's electrical, there's all kinds of things in there, but basically that's mechanical, to get that thing off the ground. That's the shuttle going up there. Who on the earth would use this thing? Well, that's where you grind up things to see what's inside. Chemical engineering. So there's all kinds of engineering areas that you could go into. Whoa, who made this? Engineering. And look at this car. Look at all the parts. How could you ever put all the parts together? So these are opportunities for you to make a new car, make a new thing, come up with new ideas. There's opportunities for you in science and engineering. Agriculture is another thing. They produce things for food and fiber for people. You think there's any engineering in that tractor? And also it's for consumption of the public. Of course, that bull was selected, and that's a type of manipulation of nature itself. And how is agriculture and engineer relating? Of course, there's engineering in that tractor, and even in that crop that we see. It's usually like we have Roundup ready soybeans, cotton, and that way you could use Roundup to kill the weeds and not kill the crops as well. Whoa, horticulture. What is horticulture? It's the art and science of cultivating plants. You know, we only have two living things on earth, right? Plants and animals. And so if I didn't love animals, I think I'd love plants for sure. So, what is an example of genetic engineering in horticulture? What would it be? Maybe an edible vaccine. Wouldn't that be something? If you could eat a banana and get your vaccination. No shots, just eat a banana or whatever fruit was, have it. So these are opportunities that you guys could do. Think of how you would like to do whenever you become in that area more advanced, so you can choose the career that you want.
We have another question, Dr. Johnson. It has to do with the agriculture and horticulture that you were just talking about, and you discussed some of the genetic modifications we can do for animals and for plants, such as killing weeds or the vaccine in the bananas. So they want to know, are genetically modified, both animals and plants, are they a part of the real world now? Do we see them often, or is that more of a rare thing?
Okay, you do see more and more of those, but there is some resistance to having those because some people think that if you modify it, then there's going to be a monster to take over the world or something, or maybe oftentimes whenever you manipulate things, it changes more than one thing, and maybe the other thing it changes you did not anticipate is bad too. So there is reason to be cautious about things, but yeah, the crops, the Roundup Ready ones are being used. That's how you get your cotton, different things. That's how, so the farmer won't have to plow the field too often. Sometimes they don't plow at all for their crops, and so there's more and more of those, but it's more. There are some restraints on them. Even restraints for using medications on animals as whenever it enters into the human food chain. So there is restraints, but there are things available that's there. Some of the crops that we use here certainly are modified so that they produce more. Even a banana. Banana is not natural either. The seeds on a banana won't make another seed. Same strawberry. And so we already have these things that are involved. And that bull that we saw a while ago was selected to have big muscles. So the natural bull doesn't, primitive bull doesn't have the big muscles like that. So all this is part of the process. And you might say, well, even you're selected because your parents select their mate. And so in somewhat, we are somewhat a manipulation of the humans doing things. All you got to do is look at dogs. I mean, look at the various variety of dogs, how they are different because of the selection process that we've done. Of course, nowadays there's more things that you can do. You could go in and make a little snippet of DNA and maybe solve a disease or something. And so now it's more elaborate of what they do. And of course, anytime you do that, you have to increase your ethics, scientific ethics associated with what all you do and how much you manipulate it. Like cloning, for example. We clone animals, but we don't clone humans. And so there are restraints in those.
Thank you.
Okay, and so ecology is very important. We're worried about the global change of things, aren't we? And we have the environmental thing. We're trying to prevent pollution, to maximize use of things. It's what to do. And entomology, insects. Some people love insects. Some people even love scorpions of all things. But you ever looked at a scorpion? It's very primitive looking. And in fact, scorpions are older than sharks are. And so what about insects and medicine? Are they related? You see that mosquito? See that blood in that mosquito? Mosquitoes do not have blood. They're getting it from somebody. They usually like to get it from birds who are sleeping at night and just kind of easy there to get things, because you've heard about they're looking at disease or looking at birds because mosquitoes frequently bite the birds. And so entomology is associated with medical field. How does it impact? Well, half of all the people who've ever lived on that earth, you see that earth right there? Half of all those people have either had or have died from malaria. That's a lot of people from malaria. And here we can see the malaria bug there, and of course it's transmitted by mosquitoes that we see there. And so there are different fields of medicine, maybe a human physician, and maybe pharmacology, maybe public health. And this is what I want to mention to you before about how science can modify the world. See, smallpox is removed from Earth, other than Russia and the United States military has smallpox, but no one else gets smallpox in the world. Scientists have removed it from the world, which is an amazing accomplishment to be able to do that. We have a lot of smallpox history in the United States. And so research is very important in doing things that can influence things. Maybe you want to be a veterinarian as one of those fields, or maybe you want to go into veterinary to security. So here we can see biosecurity is a concern that we have associated. And biosecurity is not only for the people, also for the animals. Back in 2001, they had hoof and mouth disease in England, and they had 2,000 farms. 8 million animals had to be destroyed because of the hoof and mouth disease, to eradicate it from the country. And that's part of the mechanism to get rid of disease. And how they got rid of smallpox was to isolate the different areas and to prevent that. And so animals in research, we have to have animals in research because, as I was saying before, we have to use a physiologic model if we're studying physiology. If you're studying function, you've got to have individuals that have that. And so animals are similar in physiology. Animals can test things. Even if you have a computer model to test and say, I'm just going to use computer models, that was based on cells. Cells came from animals at one time. Ultimately, you're going to have to get back to the animal itself. And here we see some diseases that were studied in animals: anthrax in sheep, cholera in various species, rabies, various species, so you can get rabies, the dogs get rabies, insulin in dogs. So if you know anybody with a diabetic, all that relates to research that was done in dogs. And they took a little piece of pancreas from one dog and transferred it to another dog, and the insulin in the transplanted tissue was able to be produced and maintain the diabetic dog, and that was the first experiments that were done in diabetes. Leprosy, armadillos get leprosy. So there's usually an animal model that could be used to study the different things related to human disease. Here we see virtually every medical achievement for the last century depends upon animals, either cells or the animals directly themselves. So you have to have animals in research if you want to advance medicine along the way. Maybe veterinary medicine. Veterinarians do three things. One, they prevent. They try to prevent things. You ever been to a veterinary clinic? You see all this information around that we see. A lot of information that's there, and that's what they try to do. They also treat and diagnose is what they do. So they work on zoonotic diseases, they work on these various things. So basically three things: they prevent, diagnose, and they treat. They much rather prevent, and so that's why you get vaccination. You need to prevent disease yourself to get vaccination. They work in health, they work in protecting humans, and clinical trials is what they do. You see that horse in there? Can you see the horse? The horse is in there getting surgery done on him. Sometimes they work on zoo animals, zoonotic disease. I told that boy not to lick that horse, that dog, and so here we can see it. The different disease. Zoonotic disease is something you get from animals, animals get from you. Anthrax are the various ones that you can see. Mad cow disease. Remember Old Yeller, the movie Old Yeller? It was rabies that they were worried about. And so we have mammals of different kinds, and there's three things that makes a mammal. One is hair. They don't have scales. They don't have feathers. Mammary gland, that's their name, mammals. And special ear bones in an animal, in a mammal. You have special ear bones. And so if we look back, and this is what scientists do, they look back in time by looking at specimens, and they also look at the embryo development. And so here we see an early reptile, and then we see a mammal-like reptile that we see. Then we see mammals in the lower left-hand side. And those mammals, you just have one jaw on the bottom. The dentary bone is one, but a reptile has three. And those two extra bones in the reptile went to make your bones in the ear. And scientists predicted that for a long time because they saw it on the embryo. But later on, they finally found one. They found a 125 million year old fossil with the inner ear bones still connected. So early embryonic stage of you and I, modern mammals, have the middle ear still attached to the jaw. So that's where the bones came from the jaw during your embryonic development. So there are different areas that you can have a lot of research. I don't have a chance to tell you about this experiment, so we're going to have to move along. But there's all kinds of fields in medicine that you could go into. And so this is your test. Who looks at that? Okay, who does that? A dentist. And here we can see orthopedics. So there's lots of opportunity in the different fields that you can do. Maybe at cardiology. And here we can see that in Texas A&M there's a person that makes a device that helps the heart. So you just insert that into the heart and it helps do the pumping that we can see. And here we can see someone's blood vessels in the heart. You can see where it's occluded up there, and then this is after the stent. This is my heart. And so I'm happy to be here with you because I got a stent in my heart. Scientists are curious, observant. When I was a kid, my parents said you ask too many questions. You cannot ask too many questions. You always want to ask questions. That's what scientists do. And they had a chance to travel. And here's just some of the places I've traveled. Here you can see Mount Rushmore. There's 4 presidents up there. You can see in the middle Mount Fuji in Japan, and Hawaii over on the left-hand side, right next to the Washington Monument. You can see there's Paris, Rio de Janeiro, and on the lower right-hand side is Stockholm, Sweden, where every scientist want to go. They want to go there because they give the Nobel Prize there. And so in that city hall that you see right there, there is a big room in the middle, and they give a Nobel Prize in that big room. And then beside that is another room laced in gold, and they go dance in the gold room after they get the Nobel Prize. I've danced in the gold room. You can too. And these are just travels of a scientist. And how much did I pay to go to these? Nothing, because I presented scientific meetings, scientific presentations at these meetings. Here we see the Great Wall of Texas, right? No, Great Wall of China that we see there. There we see San Francisco and the Golden Gate of Galveston. No, that's the Golden Gate that we see in San Francisco. And so here were some students. We went to China one time, and the students there knew about the rock garden, but they'd never been there, didn't have the chance to go, so we all went to that rock garden. Here we can see in Texas, there's the Alamo, and there's the second largest canyon in the United States. The first is of course, the Grand Canyon, but this is Putador Canyon in Canyon, Texas. Also, I traveled with Flat Stanley. He went with me on the plane. He got into the cockpit of the plane. He was on the subway in Washington, D.C. Here he's right over there by the White House that we could see. We went to Chinatown. They went to the scientific meeting with him. He met people at the Museum of Natural History. There he is in the Museum of Natural History. I had to get him out of a hippo, or is that a rhino? Hippo's mouth I had to get him out of. And then I went to a school that was there. This is a student that I had that taught a school. And so I was able to do that. Teaching is another science part that you could be involved with. And so we need scientists in government. We do, to figure out how things work. That's what scientists do. I'll be happy to say any questions that you might have.
We have lots of questions. These kids are very interested in science, which is a great thing to see. The first questions they have, they want to know about you. Why did you choose this profession to pursue? How long did you have to go to school to get to where you are now? And then how long have you been in the job that you're currently in?
Okay. I was raised in a rural farm, and so I wanted to do things for the farmers. So that's public service work, like what I do now. We're doing things to benefit others. And also, I was always curious to want to know how things work. And I wanted to invent something kind of like the clothespin. I still use a clothespin now for chips, or whenever I have my vegetables, or the frozen vegetables or something I put in the freezer. And so I wanted to invent something like that. And that's what scientists do, is they invent the experiment. They also have to invent sometimes the equipment that they do to be able to test things. And so I was interested early on in that type of thing. And then I was able to go to college. And in the college, you were exposed to experiments people were doing. In some of the classes, we did experiments. Sometime we had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go milk cows, and we had experiments associated with how much milk the cow would produce and things. So that was got me interested in that. And then as I advanced further, as scientists, you start out with a big field, and then you go to a smaller and smaller area, so you can have more detail in your specific area. And so my area was in reproduction, so I worked on reproduction in the horse, try to increase the number of horses if a person wanted to increase the number of horses, or maybe sterilize too many horses if you have wild horses or type of thing. And so that's how I got interested in that. So I went to college for a long time, it seemed like. That's what my parents say. But you get financial assistance for going to college. You usually get a graduate assistant. So I went to North Carolina State, and from there I went to Virginia Tech to get my master's degree. Then I went to Colorado State to get my PhD. And then from there I went to Southwestern Medical School for a postdoctoral training, got on the faculty there, and then I came to Texas A&M 30 years ago. So I've been here, 35, 37 years or so. I've been in the era of doing experiments. And also, while I was at Southwestern, you had to teach something, and so I taught in a course with 12 other faculty members, histology. And so I really got interested in histology, and my research itself involved histology. So I just started developing that. So right now I have 270 students in my histology classes of 5 different sections that I have. And so I put together a YouTube channel, VIBS Histology. It's a YouTube channel. We have over 10,000 subscribers that go to that channel. And so I'm interested in the research thing to explore, to discover new things, but also not only discover that, you want to write it up. So I have 110 publications, and I've presented talks at 4 different continents, and those are the travels that you saw. And so you have to discover things and then try to tell the world about it to convince them that you can do things, or that your hypothesis is correct, and then they can test it, because you've got to be reproducible, or no one would believe it that we have.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. That's great information, and really exciting to know about what individuals do and how they get to where they are now, and all the things they've learned along the way. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we didn't get to all of your questions, but they were great questions, and we really encourage you to take the time to go research those answers and find out more, and maybe that will develop the path you will take in your career as well. So if you want to learn more about STEM-related fields or veterinary medicine or other science topics, we encourage you to visit our website. It's peer.tamu.edu. And until we see you next time, we hope you have a great day and learn some science.